The boarding pod hit the hull like a fist. Captain Elena Voss felt the shudder through her boots before the alarms even started screaming. She did not flinch. She had felt worse. She had felt the Concordia take hits that should have killed everyone aboard, and yet here they still were, breathing, waiting, alive. "Report," she said. "Pod locked onto airlock 4, said Ensign Okafor, his voice tight. "2 more inbound. They're not shooting, Captain. They're boarding." Of course they were. High Marshal Draxu Ven did not want to kill the last human warship. He wanted to parade it. He wanted every species in the galaxy to watch human sailors dragged out in chains, so that no one would ever again think of resisting the Kelthari Empire. Voss walked to the viewport. Outside, the Kelthari fleet stretched farther than her eyes could measure. Hundreds of warships, silver and black, arranged in a perfect crescent around the smoking ruins of what used to be Earth's outer defense line. 10 years of war had reduced humanity's navy to one ship, one tired, patched-together, bleeding ship. And somehow, Voss was smiling. "Captain?" Okafor asked. "The boarding parties. Should I sound general quarters?" "No," Voss said. "Let them come aboard." Okafor stared at her like she had lost her mind. Maybe she had. 10 years of war did that to a person. But there was something steady in her eyes that made him hold his tongue. On the bridge speakers, a new voice broke through, deep and amused, translated by the ship's system into flat, mechanical English. It was Draxu Ven. "Humans, this is your final chance to be remembered as something other than vermin. Open your airlocks. Kneel before my soldiers. Perhaps I will let a few of you live, as pets, so that history remembers what your species once was, before it was nothing." Static crackled. Somewhere on the lower decks, Voss could hear her crew, what remained of them, 31 souls, where once there had been 400, go silent, listening. "Captain," Okafor whispered. "What do we do?" Elena Voss reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data chip, one she had carried hidden for 6 years. She had never shown it to anyone, not even her closest officers. She walked to the command console and inserted it. "We finish what we started," she said quietly. The chip did nothing dramatic at first. No lights flared, no alarms sounded. Just a single line of text appeared on every screen throughout the ship, glowing pale blue against the black. "Concordia Protocol. Sleeper awakened." Okafor frowned at it. "What is that?" "Captain, I've never seen that program before. It's not in any manual." "It's not supposed to be," Voss said. "It was never meant for you to see. Not until now." Down in the boarding corridor, the Kelthari soldiers cut through the outer airlock with practiced ease. 8 of them, tall, gray-skinned, wrapped in armor that had crushed fortresses on a dozen worlds. Their leader, a broad-shouldered officer named Threx, stepped through first, weapon raised, expecting resistance. He found none. The corridor was empty. Dim red emergency lights flickered along the walls. It smelled of scorched metal and old blood. "Spread out," Threx ordered in his native tongue. "Find the crew. Bring the captain to me alive. The marshal wants her paraded, not killed." His soldiers moved through the ship in practiced formation, boots echoing on the metal floor. They found empty mess halls, abandoned quarters, corridors stripped of anything valuable. It was like walking through a grave. Then Threx's comm crackled. It was the flagship. "Threx, report your status." "Boarding proceeding as planned. No resistance so far. The humans have abandoned most of the ship's interior." There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end changed. It was not calm anymore. "Threx, listen carefully. We have lost contact with the 3rd and 5th fleets. All channels, do you understand? All channels." Threx stopped walking. "That is impossible. They are stationed 2 systems away, guarding the mining colonies." "We know where they were stationed." The voice snapped. "We do not know where they are now." On the bridge of the Concordia, Elena Voss watched a countdown appear on the main screen, numbers falling steadily toward 0. She had not started it. She had only unlocked the door. Somewhere else, someone had already been waiting to walk through it. "Captain," Okafor said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What have you done?" Voss did not answer right away. She thought of her old commanding officer, Admiral Reyes, dead now for 6 years, who had once taken her into a private room and told her something she never forgot. "We are not fighting to win this war with weapons, Elena. We are fighting to make them believe they already have. And when they believe that most, that is when we take everything from them." She had not understood it then. She understood it now. 10 years ago, Voss said slowly, Earth's High Command made a decision. We could not defeat the Kelthari Empire in open battle. We tried. We lost fleet after fleet, world after world, until only this ship was left standing. So we changed the plan. We stopped trying to win the war they wanted to fight. Okafor stared at her. "Then what have we been doing all this time?" "Losing," Voss said. "On purpose. Buying time. While a very different kind of war was fought somewhere they never thought to look." The countdown reached 10 seconds. Threx and his boarding party rounded a corner and finally found them, the bridge crew of the Concordia standing calm, unarmed, waiting. Threx raised his weapon, confused by their stillness. "Why do you not run?" he demanded. "Why do you not fight?" Voss looked at him, and for the first time in 10 years of war, she felt something close to peace. "Because it's already over," she said. "You just don't know it yet." The countdown hit 0. Every screen on the Concordia went black at once. The lights flickered. The hum of the engines seemed to change pitch, low and strange, like the ship itself was exhaling after holding its breath for a decade. And far beyond the viewport, across the Kelthari fleet, stretched out in its perfect, arrogant crescent, something began to happen that no one, not Voss, not Threx, not even Draxu Ven aboard his flagship, staring out at what he believed was his final total victory, was ready to understand. One by one, silently, without warning, entire sections of the Empire's communication grid began to go dark. Threx fired first and the shot went wide, because the floor of the Concordia shook so hard it threw him off balance. The lights returned a moment later, brighter than before, and the ship's speakers crackled with a new sound, not an alarm, but something closer to a heartbeat, steady and slow. Voss did not move. Her crew did not move. They had trained for this moment for years without knowing what it would look like, and now that it was here, all they could do was watch it unfold. "What did you do?" Threx demanded again, weapon raised, his soldiers fanning out behind him. "Tell me now, human, or I will—" "You'll what?" Voss asked. "Kill me? Go ahead. It won't stop anything." Threx's comm crackled violently. A different voice this time, higher, panicked. "Threx, return to the flagship immediately. Something is happening to the fleet. The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Threx stared at his comm device like it had betrayed him. Far above the Concordia, aboard the Kelthari flagship Devastator's Pride, High Marshal Draxu Ven stood on his command deck, watching the same impossible thing happen on every display around him. Green markers representing his ships were vanishing from the tactical board, not exploding, not retreating, simply gone, as if they had never existed. "Explain this," Ven snarled at his tactical officer. Lieutenant Sinacor stood near the back of the command deck, young for her rank, quiet, watching everything with sharp, careful eyes. She had studied the humans for 3 years, ever since she was assigned to intelligence during the war's final campaigns. She had read every report on their tactics, their strange stubbornness, their refusal to surrender even when logic said they should have. Her superiors had called it primitive desperation. Sena had never believed that. Desperate creatures did not build strategies that lasted a decade. "Marshal," she said carefully, "the ships have not been destroyed. Their communication signatures have simply stopped transmitting. That is not the same as being destroyed." Ven turned to her, eyes narrowing. "Then, where are they?" "I don't know," Sena admitted. "But I do not believe this is a weapon. I believe it is a message, and I believe the humans have been sending it for a very long time." Ven scoffed. "The humans are a broken species clinging to one ship. You give them too much credit, Lieutenant. With respect, Marshal, that broken species has fought us to a standstill for 10 years using a single planet's resources against an empire that spans 40 worlds. Perhaps it is time we asked ourselves how. Ven's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, another officer rushed forward, face pale. Marshal, the Fifth Fleet has resumed contact, but... He hesitated. But what? Ven snapped. But it is not our fleet responding, sir. It is someone else. Broadcasting on our command frequency. Ven ordered the channel opened. Static hissed, then cleared, and a calm human voice filled the command deck. Not Voss's voice. Someone else entirely. Older, tired, but steady. This is Dr. Marcus Chen, formerly of Earth Fleet Research Division. To the commander of this fleet, you have been looking for your 3rd and 5th divisions. I regret to inform you that they are no longer under your command. The bridge went silent. Ven's hands curled into fists. Who is this Chen? He demanded, turning to his officers. Find him. Find where this signal originates. Senecor already knew, though she said nothing yet. She had read his name once years ago in a file marked deceased. Presumed dead in the destruction of Earth's research colony on Titan 6 years prior. She felt a cold understanding settle over her. Dead men did not send messages. Down on the Concordia, Threx grabbed Voss by the collar of her uniform, his patience gone. You will tell me what is happening, or I will start killing your crew one at a time, starting with him. He gestured his weapon toward Okafor. Voss did not break eye contact. You still don't understand. This was never about this ship. This was never about this battle. You wanted a trophy, Threx. You wanted to drag humanity through the streets of your empire and call it justice for every world you conquered. But you made one mistake 10 years ago that your marshal never bothered to notice. And what mistake is that? Threx growled. You let us watch you, Voss said. You occupied our colonies. You paraded our prisoners. You let human engineers work in your shipyards. Human slaves clean your command ships. Human translators sit quietly in the corners of your war rooms while you talked about strategy like we couldn't understand a word of it. You needed us, Threx. Your empire runs on 40 conquered species doing your labor for you. And for 10 years, while you thought you were winning, we were learning everything about how your empire actually works. Threx's grip loosened slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face for the first time. You're lying, he said, but his voice wavered. Check your fleet, Voss said quietly. Check it now. Threx raised his comm with a shaking hand, opening a channel to the flagship. Devastator's Pride, this is boarding Team 7 requesting status update on the channel filled with chaos, screaming voices, overlapping reports, the sound of an entire command structure collapsing in real time. Threx lowered the comm slowly, his face pale gray. Aboard the flagship, Ven watched his tactical board lose another dozen markers. Sina stepped closer, unable to stay silent any longer. Marshal, I believe I understand what is happening. The humans did not build one final warship to fight us. They built an entire network hidden inside our own empire, using our own conquered worlds waiting for the right signal. This is not a battle you are losing, Marshal. This is a system you built collapsing under its own weight. Ven rounded on her, fury and fear mixing in his eyes. Impossible. We would have known. We would have seen it. You would have, Sina said quietly, if you had ever thought us worth watching closely. On the Concordia, the countdown that had reached 0 minutes earlier was replaced by something new. A single video feed, grainy, broadcasting from an unknown location, showing a dim room filled with humming machinery, and a man standing in front of a camera, older, tired-eyed, but very much alive. To every human still listening, Marcus Chen said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his face. The signal has been sent. 10 years of patience end today. Whatever happens next, know this. We did not lose this war. We simply let them believe they had already won it. The feed cut to black. Threx staggered back from Voss, weapon lowering slightly, his soldiers exchanging uneasy glances behind him. And in that silence, the Concordia's hull groaned, not from damage, but from something powering up deep inside the ship, something that had been dormant for years, waiting for exactly this moment to finally wake. The sound coming from deep within the Concordia grew louder, a low mechanical growl that made even Threx's soldiers step back and raise their weapons toward the walls as if the ship itself might attack them. "What is that?" Threx demanded, spinning toward Voss. "Cargo Bay 3, Voss said calmly. "We sealed it years ago. Nobody on this crew has been inside it since before you were probably assigned to this fleet." That was true. Even Okafor looked uneasy, glancing at his captain like he was seeing a stranger. "Captain, what's in Cargo Bay 3? Voss allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Insurance." Threx made a decision. He ordered 2 of his soldiers to stay and guard the bridge, and took the rest with him toward Cargo Bay 3, dragging Voss along as a hostage. She did not resist. She wanted to be there. She wanted to see it. The walk through the ship's lower decks was quiet except for the mechanical groaning growing louder with every step. They passed empty crew quarters, a memorial wall covered in small photographs and handwritten names, hundreds of them, more names than the Concordia currently had living crew members. Threx's soldiers slowed as they passed it, uneasy, though they could not read the human script. "Every person on that wall died so we could reach this moment," Voss said quietly, mostly to herself. "Don't you dare think this cost us nothing." They reached Cargo Bay 3. The heavy blast doors were covered in warning symbols and hazard tape, clearly untouched for years. Threx ordered his soldiers to force it open. Inside was not a weapon. It was a room full of screens, servers, and cables running into the ship's deepest systems, a hidden command center built secretly, years ago, disguised as decommissioned cargo storage. And in the center of it, mounted on the wall, was a photograph of Admiral Reyes, the man who had died before this war reached its final year. Voss stepped forward, ignoring Threx's weapon at her back. "This was never a warship, Threx. Not really. It was a relay station. A piece of a much larger plan Admiral Reyes started building the moment we realized we could not win this war by fighting fair." "Explain," Threx said, his voice losing its earlier confidence. 10 years ago, when your empire first invaded our system, we surrendered faster than any other species you've ever conquered. Do you remember that? Did anyone in your command ever wonder why?" Threx said nothing, but his silence answered for him. "Because losing fast meant losing on our terms," Voss continued. "We let you take our colonies. We let you put humans to work in your factories, your shipyards, your command centers, exactly like every other conquered species. And while you were busy being proud of how easily you crushed us, we were doing what humans have always done best. We were learning, copying, adapting. Every human slave in your empire has spent 10 years quietly gathering information, and every year, we sent a little more of it back here, hidden in supply shipments, in maintenance reports, in places your soldiers were too arrogant to search carefully." Threx's grip on his weapon tightened. "That is not possible. We monitor every human colony, every worker, every—" "You monitor us like tools," Voss said, "not like people. That was your mistake. You never once asked what we were thinking. You just assumed we had already given up." Elsewhere, far from the Concordia, on a supply station orbiting a distant Kelthari shipyard, an alarm began blaring through empty corridors. A maintenance worker, human, thin, exhausted, wearing the gray uniform of a slave laborer, moved calmly through the chaos toward a hidden panel behind a coolant pipe. His name was Private Aden Cole, once a soldier in Earth's now destroyed ground forces, captured 3 years ago and put to work like thousands of others. He had waited 3 years for this exact moment. He opened the panel and typed a short sequence into a hidden terminal. Across the shipyard, explosive charges, long forgotten by their Kelthari overseers, detonated in careful, precise sequence, tearing apart drone assembly lines and ammunition depots that had taken years to build. Cole did not run. He simply watched the fire spread, tears in his eyes, thinking of the family he had lost when Earth's cities burned. "For Earth," he whispered. and then he moved to help the other workers escape before the fires reached the barracks. Back aboard the Concordia, Threx grabbed Voss by the arm, fury replacing his earlier confusion. "You are telling me this entire war was a trap, that we have been fighting an enemy that let us win so it could destroy us from the inside." "Not destroy," Voss corrected. "Free. Everyone your empire has ever conquered, Threx. Every species you've enslaved, every world you've stripped of its resources. Do you think humans were the only ones angry enough to fight back? We just gave them a plan. A way to talk to each other without your empire noticing. A way to trust each other again." For the first time, real fear crossed Threx's face. "How many?" "I don't know the final number," Voss admitted. "Marcus never told me everything, not even at the end. That was the point. No single person could ever betray the whole plan because no single person ever knew all of it. Not me, not him, not anyone." A crackle of static interrupted them. Threx's comm activated on its own, a channel he hadn't opened. Marcus Chen's voice returned, calmer now, almost gentle. "Threx of the Kelthari boarding forces, you should know your marshal has already lost contact with 6 shipyards, 4 command stations, and an entire fleet division in the last 20 minutes. This is not the end of a battle. This is the beginning of the end of everything your empire built on the backs of people it decided didn't matter." Threx stared at the comm device, his soldiers exchanging terrified glances behind him. "You cannot win this," he said, though his voice shook. "My marshal will burn your ship to ash before he allows this humiliation to spread further." "He can try," Chen's voice answered. "But Threx, ask yourself something. If we were truly desperate, truly beaten, why would we let you board this ship at all? Why would we let you walk straight into the one place designed to show you exactly how deep this goes?" Silence fell across Cargo Bay 3. Then, from somewhere far above them, deep in the ship's superstructure, an alarm began to blare. Not from the Concordia, but relayed from Threx's own boarding shuttle, still docked outside. One of his soldiers turned pale. "Captain Threx, our shuttle's systems have been locked out. We cannot disengage. We cannot return to the fleet." Voss watched the color drain from Threx's face, and for the first time since this war began, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. Threx's shuttle exploded before he even finished giving the order to abandon the Concordia. The blast rocked the ship, throwing everyone in Cargo Bay 3 to the floor. Alarms shrieked through the corridors. Voss pulled herself up first, ears ringing, and saw Threx staring at the twisted metal on the display screen where his only way home used to be. "You did this," he snarled, hauling her up by the collar. "You planned this from the start." "No," Voss said, coughing through smoke drifting in from a nearby vent. "That one wasn't us. That was your own marshal." Threx froze. "What?" "Think about it," Voss said. "Draxu Ven just lost contact with half his fleet. He doesn't know what's happening. He doesn't know who to trust. The fastest way to make sure this ship never reveals anything else is to make sure nobody who boarded it ever leaves to report it." On the flagship Devastator's Pride, that was exactly the conversation taking place. Draxu Ven stood over the tactical display, watching more markers disappear by the second, his composure cracking under every commander's worst nightmare. An enemy he could not see, could not predict, and apparently could not stop. "Destroy the human ship," he ordered. "All boarding parties are expendable. I want it gone before this humiliation spreads any further." Sina Kor stepped forward, alarmed. "Marshal, we still have soldiers aboard that vessel. Threx's team are already dead as far as this war is concerned," Ven snapped. "I will not let a single derelict ship become the story the rest of this galaxy remembers. Fire." Sina hesitated only a moment before relaying the order, her stomach twisting with a feeling she did not have a name for yet. Guilt, maybe. Or the beginning of doubt. Aboard the Concordia, warning klaxons blared as Ensign Okafor's voice cracked over the internal comm. "Captain, multiple weapons locks from the flagship. They're going to fire on us directly." Voss shoved past Threx and sprinted for the bridge, the remaining Kelthari soldiers too disoriented to stop her. She burst onto the bridge to find her skeleton crew already scrambling to bring up what little defense the Concordia had left. "Shields to maximum," she ordered. "Rotate the hull. Keep the damaged sections away from their firing line." "Captain, we don't have enough power for both shields and the transmission relay," said her engineer, a wiry young woman named Priya Anand, sweat dripping down her face. "If we want to keep broadcasting the signal to the rest of the network, we lose defenses." Voss did not hesitate. "Keep the relay running. Reroute everything else." "Captain, that will leave us defenseless against—" "I know what it will leave us against, Lieutenant. Do it anyway." The first volley of Kelthari plasma fire struck the Concordia's outer hull seconds later, throwing sparks and debris through the lower decks. The ship groaned, alarms screaming, but it held, barely. Down in Cargo Bay 3, Threx grabbed one of his remaining soldiers by the arm. "We need to get off this ship before it's destroyed." "There is nowhere to go, Captain," the soldier said grimly. "Our shuttle is gone." Threx's mind raced. He had spent his entire career believing in the Empire's absolute superiority, in the certainty that Kelthari's strength could never truly be threatened. Watching his own marshal order his death without hesitation shattered something in him that 10 years of war against humanity never had. He made a decision that would have been unthinkable an hour earlier. He turned to his remaining soldiers. "Lower your weapons," he said. They stared at him in confusion. "Captain?" "I said lower your weapons," Threx repeated, his voice hard. "We are not going to die defending a marshal who abandoned us the moment we became inconvenient." He turned and moved toward the bridge, unarmed, hands raised, his soldiers following uncertainly behind him. Okafor spotted him first and raised the alarm, but Voss stopped her crew from firing. "Wait," she said. "Let him speak." Threx stopped in the bridge doorway, standing in the wreckage of a battle his own commander had started. "I want to help you survive this," he said simply. "I have spent 10 years believing my empire was righteous. I have watched today what it truly values: obedience, not loyalty. Expendability, not honor. I do not know what you have built, human, but I know I do not want to die for the man who just tried to kill me to protect his own reputation." Voss studied him carefully, judging the sincerity in his exhausted eyes. War made strange allies sometimes, and she had learned long ago not to waste an opportunity handed to her by an enemy's mistake. "Anand," she called. "Can we use his shuttle override codes to buy us any advantage?" "Maybe," Priya said, glancing nervously at Threx. "If he's telling the truth." "I am," Threx said. Another volley of fire rocked the ship. The lights flickered violently. Somewhere below, a hull breach alarm began blaring, and Voss knew they were running out of time. On the flagship, Sina Kor watched the Concordia absorb hit after hit on the tactical display, refusing to break apart despite catastrophic damage. Something about its stubborn survival unsettled her deeply. She glanced at the readouts from the collapsing fleet network scrolling across a side monitor. Station after station going dark, not from destruction, but from sudden loss of Kelthari control. She began quietly cross-referencing locations. A pattern started to emerge, one that made her blood run cold. Every single station losing contact had, at some point in the last 3 years, employed human laborers in critical infrastructure roles. Every single one. "Marshal," she said carefully, "I need to show you something." Van ignored her, too consumed with watching the Concordia's stubborn survival, snarling orders to increase weapons output. "Finish it. Now." Aboard the Concordia, Marcus Chen's voice crackled back over the open channel, calm even as the ship shook violently around Voss and her crew. "Elena," he said, using her first name for the first time in years, "the network has reached 90% activation. We are almost there. Hold the line just a little longer." "We don't have much ship left to hold with, Marcus," Voss shouted over the alarms, gripping the command console as another blast rocked the bridge. "You don't need much," Chen answered. "You just need to survive long enough for them to understand what they're actually fighting." The final volley of Kelthari fire tore through the Concordia's already crumbling shields, striking the hull directly beneath the bridge. Sparks exploded from the consoles. Voss was thrown to the floor, ears ringing, vision blurring at the edges. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw Threx pulling Okafor to safety, saw Priya screaming something about total power failure, saw the main viewport crack from corner to corner, as the void of space pressed against the last human warship's failing defenses. And then, over every remaining functional speaker on the ship, Marcus Chen's voice rose one final time, urgent and electric with something that sounded almost like triumph. "Elena, it's done. The network is fully active. Every shipyard, every colony, every conquered world we ever touched. They're rising. All of them. At once." Voss pulled herself up against the shattered console, blood trickling from a cut above her eye, staring out at the Kalthari fleet through the cracked viewport. And that was when the first Kalthari flagship on the horizon, one of Ven's own escort vessels, turned its weapons and fired, not at the Concordia, but at the ship beside it. The explosion lit up the void like a second sun, and for a moment, nobody on the Concordia's bridge understood what they had just witnessed. "Did that ship just fire on its own fleet?" Okafor asked, staring through the cracked viewport in disbelief. Voss pulled herself upright, gripping the console for support, blood still trickling down her temple. On the tactical display, more chaos was unfolding, Kalthari markers turning against each other, some going dark entirely, others simply drifting unresponsive, as if their crews had abandoned their posts. "Marcus," Voss said into the open channel, her voice hoarse. "What did you do?" Chen's voice returned, and for the first time, she heard something in it she had never heard before. Exhaustion, but also something close to grief. "We didn't turn their ships against each other, Elena. We just stopped hiding who was already on our side." The truth settled over the bridge slowly. Aboard that Kalthari escort vessel, and dozens like it across the fleet, human prisoners and enslaved workers had spent years embedded in essential roles: engineers, translators, maintenance crews, even junior officers from conquered species who had learned to trust the quiet human voices working beside them. When the signal activated, it did not create new soldiers. It simply told everyone already inside the Empire's machinery that the moment to act had finally come. "They were already there," Voss whispered, understanding fully for the first time. "All of them. This entire time." On the flagship, Draxu Ven stared at his collapsing command board in horror as ship after ship reported internal uprisings, sabotage, or complete loss of command authority. He rounded on Sinakor, fury and desperation twisting his face. "You said you studied them," he snarled. "You said you understood them better than anyone in this fleet. Explain this to me now, Lieutenant, or I will have you removed from this bridge." Sina did not flinch. She had spent years being underestimated by officers exactly like him, and something about watching his empire crumble gave her a strange, quiet courage she had never allowed herself before. "I tried to explain it, Marshal," she said. "You would not listen. Humans do not fight like we do. We conquer with strength and demand obedience through fear. They survive through connection, through trust, through refusing to let go of each other even when everything around them says they should. You gave them 10 years surrounded by every species you ever conquered, and instead of breaking them, you taught them how to build something none of us ever managed. An alliance built on something stronger than fear." Ven's hand trembled on the edge of the console. "That is sentiment, not strategy." "Perhaps," Sina said, "but sentiment just took down 6 shipyards, 3 fleet divisions, and is currently turning our own soldiers against us in real time. I suggest we take it seriously." Back aboard the Concordia, the ship groaned under the weight of its own damage, but the attack had stopped. Kalthari vessels that had been closing in to finish the last human warship were now consumed with chaos of their own, some retreating, others simply drifting, powerless. Voss moved carefully through the wreckage of her bridge, checking on her crew. Priya Anand was alive, though badly burned along one arm, gritting her teeth as another crew member wrapped the wound. Okafor helped an injured technician away from a sparking console. And in the corner, Threx knelt beside a young Kalthari soldier who had been struck by falling debris, pressing a torn piece of cloth against the wound with surprising gentleness. Voss watched him for a long moment. "Why help him?" she asked. "He's not your soldier anymore. Your empire doesn't want either of you." Threx did not look up. "Because he is still a person," he said quietly. "It took me far too long in this war to remember that applied to you as well." Voss said nothing, but something in her chest loosened slightly, an old, tired ache she had carried since the beginning of the war. She thought of every human colony destroyed, every crew member lost, every name etched onto the memorial wall 2 decks below. None of it had been undone by this moment. None of the dead were coming back, but for the first time in 10 years, she allowed herself to believe their deaths had built towards something real. She moved to the comm station and opened a channel, broadcasting not to Marcus Chen this time, but outward, toward the chaos of the collapsing fleet. "This is Captain Elena Voss of the Earth vessel Concordia," she said, her voice steady despite the wreckage around her. "To every soldier still listening from a species the Kael'thari Empire once called conquered. You were told you were nothing without them. You were told resistance was pointless, that no one would ever help you, that this was simply how things were meant to be. I am telling you now, it was always a lie. You were never nothing. You were only ever waiting for someone to stand beside you." On dozens of ships throughout the fleet, on stations orbiting distant worlds, in shipyards burning with sabotage fires lit years in advance, alien crews of species Voss had never even met paused to listen to a voice broadcasting in a language their translators struggled to keep pace with. And slowly, in places the Kael'thari Empire had ruled for generations, weapons that had once been aimed outward at enemies began turning inward, toward the officers who had commanded silence for far too long. Aboard the flagship, Ven watched the last functioning sections of his command board flicker and die, one by one, until only a handful of markers remained under his direct control. His hand shook, not from fear of death, but from the unbearable realization that everything he had built his identity upon, strength, conquest, the absolute certainty of Kael'thari superiority, had been quietly, patiently dismantled by the very people he had mocked as vermin only hours earlier. "This cannot be real," he whispered. Sina stepped closer, her voice quiet but firm. "It is real, Marshal. And I believe there is one more thing you should understand before this ends." She pulled up a final piece of intelligence she had been assembling in secret for the past hour, cross-referencing years of supposedly unrelated data. Her hands trembled slightly as she displayed it on the main screen. "The human ship you ordered destroyed," she said. "The Concordia. It was never simply the last human warship, Marshal. According to everything I have gathered, it was something far more specific, a relay point, a trigger. And there is a reason Dr. Marcus Chen chose that particular ship, out of everything remaining in Earth's broken fleet, to carry the final signal." Ven turned to her slowly. "What reason?" Sina met his eyes, and for the first time, even she looked unsettled by what she had discovered. "Because the Concordia isn't just carrying the signal, Marshal," she said. "It's carrying something else. Something Admiral Reyes hid aboard that ship before his death. Something even Captain Voss might not fully understand yet. And if my analysis is correct, it is about to activate in the next few minutes, aimed directly at you." Voss felt it before she understood it. A faint vibration beneath the ruined bridge floor, rhythmic, deliberate, rising from somewhere deep in the ship she thought she knew completely. "Anand," she called. "Are we venting atmosphere? What is that?" Priya, cradling her burned arm, shook her head and checked a console that still flickered weakly. "Negative, Captain. That's not structural. That's coming from below decks. Section 9. But there's nothing in Section 9, it's just old storage." Voss felt a chill settle over her. Admiral Reyes had personally overseen the Concordia's final refit 6 years ago, before his death, and there had always been parts of that refit he never fully explained, sections of the ship marked off-limits even to her. She had trusted him. She had never asked why. "Show me," she said. She left Threx in charge of the bridge, a decision that would have seemed insane a day earlier, and made her way down through the wounded ship with Okafor at her side. The vibration grew stronger with every deck they descended, until finally they reached a sealed hatch in Section 9 that Voss had walked past 1,000 times without a second thought. It was already open. Inside was not storage. It was a single chamber, humming with quiet energy, and at its center stood a tall cylindrical device Voss had never seen before, covered in old Earth fleet markings and a small brass plate that read, simply, "For when it matters." A recorded message activated the moment she stepped close, projecting a final image of Admiral Reyes, older and more tired than she remembered him, standing in this same chamber years earlier. "Elena," the recording said, "if you're watching this, it means the signal reached its full activation, and the Kelthari fleet is in chaos. Good, that means everything we built worked. But there is one more piece of this plan I never told you because I needed you to lead without the weight of knowing it." Voss's breath caught. Okafor stood silently beside her, sensing this was not a moment to interrupt. "This device is not a weapon," Reyes continued. "We built it during the earliest days of the war, when a research team managed to capture and study something the Kelthari have hidden from every species they've ever conquered. A core command relay, the true heart of their empire's control network. Every fleet, every shipyard, every occupied colony answers not just to Draxu Ven, but to a system buried beneath his authority, a network the Kelthari themselves rely on completely and understand only partially. It's ancient, it's fragile, and it has one critical flaw." The image flickered, static crawling across Reyes's face. "It cannot be attacked directly. Any attempt to strike it triggers immediate lockdown across the entire empire, and total war. But it can be reasoned with, restructured, given new instructions, if you understand its language. Marcus spent the last 6 years learning that language. This device carries what he built, the final key. Once activated near an active fleet command signal, it doesn't destroy the Kelthari Empire, Elena. It frees everything the Empire has been controlling without their permission for centuries. Every subjugated system, unlocked from forced compliance, all at once." Voss felt her knees weaken. She grabbed the edge of a nearby console to steady herself. "I couldn't tell you sooner." Reyes's recording continued, his voice softening. "Because if the Kelthari ever suspected we understood their core network, they would have annihilated Earth completely rather than risk it. You needed to believe this was simply resistance, rebellion, a desperate last stand. It needed to look like exactly what it was in humanity, refusing to die quietly. That performance saved billions of lives across the galaxy, including your own. I am sorry I couldn't tell you the truth. I am proud of who you became without it." The recording ended. Voss stood in silence for a long moment, processing 10 years of assumptions crumbling and reforming into something far larger than she had ever imagined. Okafor finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Captain, is this thing active?" Voss looked at the device, its steady hum growing louder, pulsing in rhythm with something far away. "It's about to be," she said. "We're still close enough to Ven's flagship command signal. Marcus said this ship needed to survive long enough for a reason. This is it." She activated the final sequence. Aboard the Devastator's Pride, Sina Kor watched the readings spike on her console, confusion turning quickly to alarm. "Marshal, I'm detecting an unknown signal broadcasting directly into our core command network. Origin, the Concordia." Ven's face went pale. "That's impossible. No outside force has ever touched that system." "They have now," Sina said. Across the galaxy, in the same instant, every world the Kelthari Empire had ever conquered felt something shift. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Control systems that had silently enforced compliance for generations released their grip. Communication restrictions lifted. Ancient safeguards built into infrastructure long before Ven's grandfather commanded a single ship recognized new authorization and, for the first time in centuries, asked their true original custodians for consent instead of demanding obedience. Species who had forgotten what freedom felt like discovered all at once that the chains had never been as absolute as they believed. On the flagship, Ven watched his authority evaporate in real time, not through violence, but through the quiet withdrawal of a system he never fully understood, one his empire had inherited and weaponized without ever learning its deeper truths. He turned to Sina, desperate. "Stop this. Now. That is an order." Sina looked at him for a long moment, then set down her console controls. "No, Marshal, I don't believe I will." Ven stared at her, betrayal and disbelief warring across his face as around him, officer after officer on the bridge quietly stepped back from their stations, unwilling to enforce an authority that had just been proven hollow. Hours later, the Concordia drifted in a debris field that had once been the edge of a Kael'thari armada, badly damaged but intact, surrounded not by enemies, but by ships bearing markings from a dozen unfamiliar species. The first wave of a newly liberated galaxy, arriving not to finish the fight, but to honor the ship that had ended it. Voss stood at the shattered viewport, watching alien vessels move cautiously closer, their crews staring in quiet awe at the small, battered warship that had somehow outlasted an empire. Threx stood beside her, still uncertain of his place in whatever came next, and Okafor leaned against a repaired console nearby, exhaustion and disbelief mixing on his face. "What happens now?" Threx asked quietly. Voss thought of Reyes, of Marcus, of the memorial wall 2 decks below covered in names that would never see this moment. She thought of Adan, Cole, and thousands like him, scattered across the galaxy, who had spent years pretending to be broken so they could quietly break something far larger instead. "Now," she said, "we help them figure out how to be free. That's harder than winning a war, Threx. Nobody ever tells you that part." Later, a transmission reached Earth's remaining ground stations, the first in 10 years that did not carry news of retreat or loss. It came not from a Kael'thari authority, but from a coalition of newly freed species, requesting contact, requesting alliance, requesting to understand how one broken, stubborn, grieving species had somehow found a way to free an entire galaxy from the inside out. Voss read the message twice before allowing herself to sit down at last. 10 years of exhaustion finally settling into something that almost felt like rest. Earth had not won this war by being the strongest. It had won by refusing, even at the very end, to stop believing that everyone still trapped beside them deserved to be free too. And for the first time since the war began, the last human warship did not feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning.